Hi everyone, my name is Tyler and I'm here to help you get into your new 40k army. 40k as a hobby can be very expensive to get into, but my goal with this series is to help you get a full army going without having to break the bank. Before we dive into the list, let's talk about some basic rules that we're going to be using for the list building process here. Our first goal is going to be to keep it affordable and utilize box deals. For everything that we're going to be looking at today, we're going to be looking at it from an MSRP value from Games Workshop themselves. Now, I don't recommend buying everything MSRP from Games Workshop. Often, local hobby stores, eBay, Amazon, things of that nature will have much better deals for the kits that I'm about to show you. Our second goal is that we're going to be making the list in steps, starting at 500 points and working our way up to 1,000 points, 1,500 points, and 2,000 points. Our third rule is we're going to be avoiding Forge World and Finecast. Many Forge World models are often very pricey for the points that they provide you on the table, and the resin used can be hard to work with, especially for beginners. As far as Finecast goes, I just don't think that they're quite as high quality as the plastic models that you can get otherwise. Our fourth goal is to aim to make lists with decent competitive viability. We're going to be trying to make lists that can do well at casual tournaments, in your games with friends, or maybe even get you some wins at major tournaments. Our fifth and final rule is the most important one. Just because I don't mention a model in my list, it doesn't mean that it isn't good. The most important thing that you can do is collect models that you think are cool. There's an entire side of the hobby that has nothing to do with playing, and if you don't like the models you're painting and building, you're not going to get the most out of this hobby. Today we're going to be talking about the army of corrupted warwalkers, the Chaos Knights. Chaos Knights are an army of once noble knight households that have completely fallen to chaos. These are towering machines of war piloted by a chaos noble, as well as the tormented spirits of all of its previous pilots tied together to its inherent machine spirit. They can be broken up into one of two classifications. You have your smaller light walkers known as war dogs, and then you have your larger knights that tower over the battlefield. These are your abominants, your despoilers, your tyrants, and all of those. This is an army that is entirely made of these larger walkers, and they will often ally with demons, chaos, and renegade space marines, or they might even go and trail their own warpath. So what are the reasons to start a Chaos Knight army for yourself? Well, for one, they are a hyper-elite army with a very small number of models that are much more durable than the majority of other armies. It means that you're going to have a very durable time, and you don't really have to spend too much of your time moving units around. They also often have great access to tank killing capabilities. Taking out the enemy armor is often going to mean that your opponent can no longer effectively deal with your knights, setting you up to just roll them over. You can also very easily include these in all other Chaos armies. If you want to collect demons, if you want to collect Thousand Suns, Death Guard, World Eaters, or just generic Chaos Space Marines, these are able to be excellent supplements to those armies and can help you get to 2,000 points in those armies much quicker. They're also going to cause a lot of extra battle shocks to your opponent, with much worse leadership than your opponent might normally be able to take. This is going to make you more durable as well, and also make you more lethal to those battle shocked enemies. Couple that in with their high OC on each of their individual models, and it makes it even harder for those opponents' models who are constantly getting battle shocked to be able to strip objectives away from you. They're also able to circumnavigate one of the biggest problems for many vehicle-style armies. That is, getting through terrain and being move blocked. Because of their Knights of Shade stratagem, you are able to skip these very annoying and frustrating aspects of the game entirely and really get around your opponent's plans. They're also very big models, which can be a lot easier to paint than small models. They look very intimidating because you look at the large canvas size and you think, man, there is so much going on here. But it gives you so much space to work with that it's very easy to make mistakes and then correct it later. And finally, it's a great army to magnetize. With proper magnetization, you can very quickly get to the point that you're never going to need to buy another knight again. If you have 6 boxes of War Dogs, 6 boxes of Armigers, an Abominant box, and a Cerastus box, you're pretty much set for the rest of your life for every single edition that you ever want to play Chaos Knights for. There are, of course, reasons to avoid collecting Chaos Knights. Number one, they are a stat check army at the end of the day. This means your games are usually going to be a lot more binary. Either your opponent is going to have a lot of units that can kill tanks, or they don't. If they do have all those tank killing capabilities, your game is going to be a miserable experience. If they don't, then your opponent is going to have a miserable experience as they can't get rid of any of your units. Chaos Knights can also struggle immensely with the secondary part of the game without proper allied unit support. You do not want to have these 150 point units wasting their time doing secondaries like deploy homers or investigate signals when they could be trying to win you the game. You also wind up giving up a lot of points in Bring It Down, meaning that if your opponent runs a fixed style list, then they can kind of just do whatever they want with you and take either deploy homers, engage on all fronts, whatever they want, and just take Bring It Down as that other fixed. There's also not a lot of variety in terms of models that you're going to be able to use. Most of the units are going to be the same chassis with slightly different guns. If you don't like the look of the 5 unique models that your army has, it's not going to be a good army for you. This lack of variety can also make it hard to find the popular kits. War Dogs, for example, were basically out of stock since I began playing 40k back in 9th edition, and they really only recently started to show up back on shelves. Since then, they've just been sold out everywhere. Your army rule is Harbingers of Dread. Starting at the very first battle round, your opponent is going to take worse battle shocks and worse leadership tests if they are close to you. Turn 3 onwards, their battle shocks are also going to cause you to be +1 to wound against them, and are going to make them -1 to hit against you. This means that you are going to be more lethal and more durable while they are losing their ability to hold objectives. Your big knights can also walk over small ruins. Where this gets really powerful though is when in tandem with Forged in Terror, your detachment rule. If your Chaos Knight is within 12 inches of another unit that has taken any kind of damage, then they are going to have to take a battle shock, even if they are not below half strength. This means that just small chip damage from things like these Havoc multi-launchers that you're probably going to be running can cause large cascading effects for your opponent and really stomp out a primary game. Now, when you start collecting Chaos Knights at 500 points, you're going to run into the problem of big knights are not an eligible unit to run in a 500 point game. This means that you are limited to War Dogs and Armigers. This means that up to the 1000 point list, all 3 of the lists I'm going to be showing you today are going to start the exact same way. At 1500 points, one of the lists will have a small variation. For the 500 point list, what we're going to be doing is just going and picking up 2 boxes of War Dogs. With this, we're going to be making 1 War Dog Stalker with a Havoc multi-launcher, an Avenger Chain Cannon, a Reaper Chain Talon, and the Aura of Terror. For the battle line, we're going to be using 1 War Dog Brigand with a Havoc multi-launcher, and we're going to be using 1 War Dog Carnivore with a Havoc multi-launcher. Now, there are arguments that you can make for the Brigand to potentially not take the Havoc multi-launcher, instead take the Stubber because of how it changes things with line of sight, but I'm not really going to worry about that. We're just going to go with the generic good option of the Havoc multi-launcher. The War Dog Stalker, on the other hand, is going to be a little bit strange, as he's not going to have his usual loadout at all that you would see at larger games. Instead, he's going to be having a loadout that is going to let him deal much better with infantry. At 500 points, most of your games are going to be decided by whether or not you have the ability to pick up lots of infantry from your opponent. So by having the Brigand be good with dealing with tanks, the Stalker good with dealing with infantry, and the Carnivore is a good just general melee unit, it kind of lets you hit all of your bases. For all of these 1000 point lists, what we're going to be doing is just going and picking up 1 more box of War Dogs to go with the 2 that we had before. For this, I've still got the Stalker with the same loadout, we've still got the 1 Carnivore, but we've got 4 Brigands. Now, if you really decide that you want to have more melee in the army, you can make some of the Brigands Carnivores, and it's not going to be too much of a big deal. This just lets you use the most efficient points that you can. At 1500 points is where we're going to have our first split between the 3 lists. The first 2 lists are going to be wanting to go and pick up 1 more box of War Dogs, 1 box of Knight Armigers from the Imperial Knight side, as well as 1 box of Nurglings. At this point, we're going to have the War Dog Stalker set up with its most typical loadout that you're going to see, the Havoc multi-launcher, the Demon Breath Spear, and the Slaughter Claw. Now, the Huntsmen are going to be equipped with the Meltaguns, the Brigands are all going to have Havoc multi-launchers, the Carnivores all have Havoc multi-launchers. The one thing that I want to bring up that someone in my comment section mentioned in a previous video is that with one box of Nurglings, you can actually get 2 units of Nurglings out of them. Instead of putting all of the Nurglings onto the one base, have all of the 15 or so free Nurglings that aren't part of the pile that you glue together from both sides be off on their own and crawling over different types of terrain pieces so that you can kind of have them also be that second unit. It does require that you do a little bit more work with your basing materials, but that's fine because it's something that makes your units look more interesting anyways. Taking this 1500 point list up to 2000 is going to be pretty simple. For this style, we're going all War Dogs. So we're going to pick up one final box of War Dogs, and then we're going to be picking up one more box of Nurglings. Now, there are a few different ways that you can build this list. If you want to cut a few Nurglings, you can give yourself a few more Brigands, take away a couple of Carnivores, and that's totally fine. But with the style that I have here, we've got 4 units of Nurglings, 3 Brigands, 2 Huntsmen, and 6 Carnivores, plus the 1 War Dog Stalker. The Nurglings are going to be able to infiltrate and potentially get up in your opponent's face and stall them out for that first turn or so that your knights can get into a good position. They can also be saved as deep strike units to be able to go into the backfield, to perform homers, to do investigate signals, to get you engaged on all fronts, to get you behind enemy lines, whatever you really need them to do. The second style of 2000 point list that I have for you is going to be focusing on picking up a Knight Abominant so that we can have a big knight leading all of our smaller knights. The Knight Abominant is going to be made into a Knight Rampager. The Knight Rampager has some very nice inherent synergy with the other melee knights in your army. Being able to turn all of your Carnivores from hitting on 2s to hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s if they're close to this thing is going to be a very big boost in their damage, and it's basically going to mean that you hit every single attack that you throw out. It is very rare that with 6 attacks, or maybe even 12, depending on what you're going with, that you are not going to be able to hit all of those attacks in. On the other hand, if you want to have a more shooty style Chaos Knight list with a big knight, what we're going to do at 1500 points is pick up 2 boxes of Armigers instead of picking up the 1 War Dog and 1 Armiger that we did with the previous style. Now, the Huntsmen are going to be equipped with Demon Breath Meltaguns because they really do just want to make sure that they are going into vehicles, given that they are able to reroll wound rolls of 1 and also damage rolls of 1 with their Demon Breath Meltas. The War Dog Stalker is still going to have the loadout that we're used to seeing him with now, and to support these Huntsmen, we're going to be giving them Carnivores to work with. This is partly because the Brigands are a little too pricey with what we might want, but also because having some melee threat in this army is still very important. Now, to round out this shootier style Chaos Knight list, we're going to be going and picking up a Cerastus Knight Lancer from the Horus Heresy selection of models. The Cerastus Knight is going to take over as our leader and is going to be equipped with the Aura of Terror so that he can still sticky the objective in the backfield. And then he's going to be leading 3 Brigands, 4 Huntsmen, and 3 Carnivores, all with the basic loadouts that you are used to seeing from every single one of these lists I've shown you so far. This list can struggle a little bit more with doing secondaries than other lists might, so you might want to turn some of the Brigands into Carnivores so that you can try to fit in some other stuff, or maybe you go and you pick up a couple more Huntsmen. It just depends, so that you can get about 40 to 80 more points for some Nurglings. But what this list is going to do very well is that the Cerastus Knight Lancer is going to give friendly War Dogs the assault keyword on their guns. This means that suddenly your War Dogs, who are already quite fast, are going to be able to advance to go even faster, get into Melta range even quicker, hit even harder with those reroll 1s to wound and reroll damage rolls of 1, and you're going to be able to start just blasting your opponent off the table. And that's going to be Chaos Knights. Overall, it's an army where it can be pretty hard if you just buy the generic basic boxes that you want to have a list that isn't in some way competitively viable. There aren't really a ton of choices with the army, which can often mean that there's not as many moments of cool decision making in your list building, but it's also very hard to go wrong, making it not too bad for a beginner army or even a second army for you to pick up. The price can vary a bit, but overall it's going to be sticking around that $600 tier, where you could go a little below, but if you want something that's really going to stick around, you've got to go a little bit above. Because of that, we're going to be putting them right below T-Suns and right above Drukhari in the $600 to $750 tier. And that is everything I have for you today. If you enjoyed the video, please consider doing all the YouTube pleasantries. If you want to help support the content so that I can continue to put out videos, consider becoming a member on YouTube or supporting me over on Ko-fi. Supporters receive things like early videos, shoutouts, heavier weight on their votes for community polls for what content I do next, as well as one-on-one help with building up their lists. Thank you all, and I will see you in the next video.